What's going on, guys? Welcome to Collecting Keys. I'm your host, Mike the Han, here with Dylan Cook today. Dan is in Mexico, floating around in a pool, drinking margaritas, striking up conversations with strangers like he does when he's had a couple drinks.
Sounds like a Dan thing.
Totally, dude. He kind of has like that gift of gab, where he just kind of, like, he enjoys talking to like random people, and then he's like, can actually like make friends with like random people. I just don't care enough. I don't know. Like, it depends on the situation entirely. But if I'm just sitting in like a hotel, pool, bar, I'm not going to talk to some random person I'm never going to see again. I just don't care.
I would need a couple of liquid encouragement.
I would need a lot of liquid encouragement. And like, if they talk to me first, I'm happy to talk with them. I'm like never going to strike up that conversation though.
Yeah. Last time I was on a vacation, I think I did we were in Florida or something, and I saw some guy with a Cincinnati Bengals hat. And like, that's how the conversation started.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
To be fair, so I've done that. So me and my wife, when we went to South Africa in 2022, we land in Cape Town. Literally the first person I see in the Cape Town airport is somebody wearing a Gonzaga basketball jersey. And I was like, that is weird.
Crazy.
So I had to talk to them, and I chatted with them for a little bit. But same thing, we had small talk in the customs line at the airport, and I never saw them again.
Exactly. Yeah.
But sure enough, they were from here. They flew in on a different flight in a different route, and they just happened to be from the same town as me, which is pretty wild.
This is a related topic, I guess. My wife and I haven't taken really a vacation basically since our kid has been born, and she's almost 2. And then plus like being the business, you're always busy, et cetera. So last night, we have so many Amex points from doing the rehabs and stuff. We booked a 5-night, 7-ish day vacation on the beach somewhere. It's gonna be really nice. And it's like, now we have something to look forward to, I guess. But at the same time, like, I know when that time comes, I'm going to be a little bit stressed out because I'm going to be like, hey, I got shit I have to do. Well,
the business side's always tough. Depending on who you talk to, some people will say, well, that's just because you're not delegated enough. I mean, you can build a lot of systems around it. I'm personally somebody that likes to integrate work with my life. So like some of my best memories, honestly, are while I'm traveling and like doing deals and doing business at the same time. I've told this story before, but like one of the cooler things that I've done was I signed with a mobile notary to sell a flip on a property while I was on a cruise in the Nile River in Egypt, right?
That's pretty badass.
So like, that's pretty cool. Or like how many sales calls I've taken, like walking around streets in like random places, I always think is pretty cool. Honestly too, I will say it makes you more interesting to the prospect if you can answer and they're like, oh, you're just kind of back. And I was like, oh, sorry, man, I'm in Tokyo right now. And they're like, what? You're instantly a more memorable business connection to that person.
That's very true. I never even thought about it that way.
Yeah. You ever read that book, Blue Fishing, that was popular like 5 years ago?
Yes, actually, I did.
So he has like a whole thing where a lot of that is about how you become more interesting as a person in business. And one of the things that he said he would do, which I think is actually a pretty cool idea. I'm not quite narcissistic enough to do this. But he said that if he ever stayed at like a very nice hotel, what he would do is he would take like the little paper notepads that were like in those hotels that would say like, oh, Marriott Paris or whatever. And then he would do follow-up letters to people where he would handwrite them on those and stick them in like an envelope. So they basically get like a handwritten note that looks like it came from the Marriott in Paris.
That's hilarious.
And so it stands out more than just like a standard piece of paper. Those little things matter, right? Or like there's this other podcaster, I can't remember his name because I listened to this guy a long time ago, but what he used to do is if there were people that he regularly saw in like the service industry, whether it was like waiters or different things, he would always, in like addition to standard gratuity or like if it was like a valet, whatever, standard gratuity, he would give them $2 bills. Oh. Because it's weird, right? And it kind of like stands out. So like if he had like a waitress all the time, he would like give her thing and then he'd also put a $2 bill in the check. He's a $2 bill guy. And he said that actually led to like a shocking number of business connections because he would, he lived in New York. So he'd hang out where like rich people hang out,
Yeah.
And so that he like kind of got like a reputation for doing this because they would all see like the same service people.
I'm going to go to my bank now and get $2 bills.
Right. Totally. But, like little stuff like that. Or when it comes to travel though, you just have to decide what your boundaries are beforehand.
Yeah.
And then just commit to them. Because I think where it's tough is if you don't plan for it, you don't commit to it, then it kind of is like a little mental load.
Right.
But also, I don't know how like comfortable and versed you are with traveling either.
Well, this will be the first time like we're going to travel with our daughter. And so we'll see how that goes.
Oh, like period. Yeah. So.
I mean, like anything that's longer than 4 hours.
Yeah.
So.
Has she been on a plane before?
No.
Oh, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Man, you missed out on all the freebies where she gets to like ride in your lap. She's going to need her own seat.
I'm like, the airplane ticket said under 2, they can still do that. So I'm like, I'm doing it. Like, we'll just trade them off between me and my wife.
Oh, you probably got, like 3 months left. Isn't she September?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, take advantage while you can. Just different. And then with Dan, his kids are older. So it's like a whole other thing. But, well, I have some gossip that I think
Let's get into
would be good for the show. And so kind of like I was leading to the beginning of the show, we will have, things that we've said. We've been doing this show now since October of 2021. So as of this recording, what's that, like 4 years and 7 months? A long time. So it'd be like episode 490 or whatever. I lost track. I don't know. Our producer puts the numbers on things. But, there's old stuff that will come up periodically. And one of the most frequently quoted things is we did this YouTube video and this episode a while ago. And it was about basically this whole thing with Pace Morby and this like whole interaction that I had with him on social media. And he did this other podcast. And he's like, if anybody doesn't agree with me, just go ahead and DM me on Instagram. And the story behind it was I was literally on a plane listening to this podcast. And I was like, I'm paying for Wi-Fi just to DM this guy right now. And so I did that. And then I had this whole exchange where I was just questioning him about the stuff that he was promoting. And his entire response was, well, if you come to my community, I'll have 1,000 people tell you about why you're incorrect. And he never took me up on it. I said, absolutely. Invite me. I would love to speak to these people. Never did it. He was all talk. And so we made like a whole thing about this. And, I basically called him a whole bunch of probably unnecessarily maybe mean names on the show. But that's like our only YouTube video that's really gotten a lot of traction. And it comes up like shocking amount. There's that one. And then one where I talked about going to Alex Ramos's workshop the first time.
Oh, yeah,
those two videos come up a ton. And so anyways, I was on my computer last night just doing some catch-up work. It's like 8:15. I get this email and speaking of standing out, this is an interesting way to do it. Legit email, it just says, give me a call in the subject line. And the person said, I have some information for you. You need to know. I promise I'm not a weirdo. I'd call you, but I can't find your phone number. And I was like, come on, that's kind of suspect. Like, what is this? But it got my attention. And so I clicked into it. I looked up the person. They're a broker over in Hawaii, a real estate agent. I'm not going to say their name or anything else specific about them. So I responded back and I'm like, I'm not sure if you have the correct person or if there's some kind of like marketing ploy or like what your deal is. And they said, it's not a marketing ploy. I said, I saw your video on Pace Morby. I sold him a property here with one of my clients and his student defaulted. It's going to get real with the SEC very soon.
Wow.
And I replied back, said, bummer. I'm not surprised by that. I've heard quite a few stories and whispers of a big lawsuit for a while. But since he's continuing on his road trip and being so audacious, I imagine the threats can't be too serious. Or maybe he's just a big enough narcissist that he doesn't care. And she said, I'm a regular broker. I repped this lead and I met him personally. He's pretty normal, actually. And then they put this idiot in charge of the entire transaction who stole the funds and the investors are about to get real. And so I kind of asked for more information on that. And basically where it kind of ended up going, I went back and forth with this person for about over an hour on email. And he said that they paid themselves out, 5 of the top people, including Pace, immediately upon escrow. Once closed, a payment was never made. I was shocked that it turned that quickly. We set the sellers up with a deed of lieu of foreclosure, so they are covered. But from that, everything's kind of out of my control. And they are pursuing legal action with all this stuff. So essentially what happened is they did like the whole thing where Pace goes and advertises, hey, bring me a deal. I'll get you paid out. I'm just going to make this much on it. It sounds like they did that. They made their money and bounced. And it literally never went as far as like to have the first payment being made. And the person basically just like stole the house. All the higher ups made their money. And now there's like a whole thing. And this is a third party person. They could have a vendetta I don't know about. But the fact that they went as far as to like track me down on an email that isn't like completely public and reach out to me to send this to me, I found very, very interesting. And I'm so riveted to just know what the ultimate fallout is going to be. Because we've been saying that something's going to happen for a while. Yeah. With like that whole like sub 2 movement. Like there's so much crooked stuff. There's been so many whispers. We've talked to so many people in the space that say they like know back and they're like, oh man, stuff's getting like really bad. But then they continue to like double down on like the road trip. And now he's like, here's a disabled lady that I'm helping buy a home in San Antonio. I'm like, what the?
Can you imagine the discovery for this would be? Having to go through all of the content, all of the bullshit. That'd be a lot. It could very well turn into like class action because they do this all over the country.
I know. And it's incessant. It's everywhere. I don't know what it's going to look like and like how vast it can possibly go and like how much tie they have like Sub2 has like as an organization to all of these people. Cause like I think that if you're providing like education, quote unquote, and then people are out just like doing stuff, it's pretty easy to have removal from other people's actions. When you are getting paid per transaction, which has also kind of been their thing, like all along, is they have like their own title and escrow company that basically does everything legit. So now you're getting your fingers involved in every deal that goes through your community, quote unquote. That's where it gets hairy really, really fast because you are fully endorsing this behavior. You know, and even if it's like a small amount, even if 99% of them are good, 1% of them are issues, or even like 0.5% of them are issues, that's going to be tens of millions of dollars worth of transactions, if not more.
I think this was like Pace was a nature of like the bull market in real estate back in that time frame. And now that the tides have turned, people are kind of getting caught with their hand in the cookie jar and they're trying to figure out ways to save their own ass.
Of course.
And like, unfortunately, this is what it comes down to.
We're seeing that with all the gurus, you know, it's just like, you know, we talked about Brandon last week and he's so heavy into his education stuff right now, primarily because he's trying to bail himself out from all these syndications that have gone sideways.
One thing that I've noticed, and this is just like me making a weird observation, is like if you just look at his content, I don't have TikTok, but like mostly like Instagram, what his content used to be to what it is now, it's like it's more vulgar. I think he like even said the F word in a thing there. That's just not
Brandon did?
Yeah, either him or someone like in his thing did. I was like, this is not his MO. Like at least it didn't used to be, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if he's off-sourcing it or what, but it's just like you can see the patterns changing and not for the better.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I mean, one of his little reels of the day talked about like, here's how you raise money. I'm like, oh, bro, don't do that. like you can't be doing that. You know, like you literally just lost a bunch of people's money that you raised. To your point about the bull market, there's a lot of people that are in that camp. It feels like the world's slowest implosion.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you ever seen like those slow motion videos of like the crushing machines?
Yes. Yeah.
They'll put like something kind of firm underneath there and it's real slow. And then all of a sudden it just goes and it just like snaps down into nothing. I feel like it's exactly what it's going to be like.
Yeah. And then we don't even know like the downstream effects of some of that. No. And I think the overall message here is just like, you should have good enough gut instincts where if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And yes, I know that's an old adage, but like I would remember trying to like understand what he was doing and just like something in the back of my head was like, this doesn't seem right.
Yeah. And also just like understanding like general morals. This has always been one of the challenges that I had when we had a wholesale business is the ethics and morals around wholesaling are very, very gray. And as we expanded more into that space with the show, and we met more operators, there became two very clear sets of personalities. There are the business owners, and this is specifically in the wholesale space, but I'm sure it exists everywhere. The business owners that their view of success is exclusively based off their top line revenue and how much money they're making, right?
Yes.
Not even the profit. It's always a top line. So a lot of them don't even take home that much money, but they'll talk about the top line a lot. The other people will talk about the sustainability of it and the success rate of it, right? And at that core, if you're sustainable and you're successful with it, that's not really possible if you don't leave a trail behind you that is a relatively positive impact for people. And that can be both your sellers, that can be your buyers. They're buying good deals, right? Your sellers feel like they're in a better place and they move on. Your title companies like to work with you because you're easy to work with. Your lenders are happy to give you loans because you pay your debts and you don't default on stuff just because all of your cash went into marketing, right? That is the other side, is the more ethical piece, is like, what is your impact in your network versus like, here's how much money I made. I don't really owe shit to anybody else.
When I first started this business, Mike, I had a very big personal dilemma of being known as a wholesaler.
It's hard. It's so hard.
And then ultimately one day I was like, hey, I can do my business the way I want to do business. Mm-hmm. And yes, will I leave money on the table? Yeah, I will. But like, that's okay. Like, I'm making enough money.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember people, when I first started out, they referred to me as an equity pirate, right? We were like stealing really? equity from these people. Wow. And I kind of liked that. Dan and I actually joked about making shirts that said like equity pirate on it.
Of course.
But there's a valid point, but it's like that business, especially, there really is a lot of people that don't have a better option. And also too, I can't tell you how many people that we had that really were happy to work with us. They fully understood that they were giving away equity on the property, and that was the cost of doing business. But they would move out of the house with a massive thank you because they had this headache that they were embarrassed about. They didn't know how to deal with. They didn't have the capacity, physically, financially, whatever it is, to deal with it. And it did solve a problem.
Yeah. Yep. And some of it is marketing. Some of it is, I guess the point I'm trying to get across that a lot of, I think, wholesalers go over is there is a difference between having sales skills and deception.
For sure.
Right. I think a lot of the people in the off-market business will cross that line if it means that they're making $5 extra from grandma.
Dude, tons of people will, and everyone, where it really gets interesting with people is I will say 95% of, more than that, I would say 99% of the people in the world, not in the world, I don't know, just in the space, 99% of people, I think there's bad people in the world too, will honestly think that they have good ethics because they don't know that they don't yet because they've never been up against a wall, right? Where you actually learn what kind of ethics you have is how you act when you are in a position where you have to do something shady in your own best interest. And if it's something that you make the decision to only act in your own best interest, sorry, you don't have good ethics.
And you can't tell yourself it'll just be this one time. You can't go down that slippery slope.
And Dan and I have ended relationships for stuff like that because we would have these business associates that we get a little bit hairy. And they would always preach, we would do things by the right way. But all of a sudden it's like, hey, we got to stick it to this old lady. And Dan and I are like, just let the $3,000 go. It doesn't matter. I was like, no, I can't lose that money. I need to force her to do this. Right. Or they lean into it too hard. And you're like, cool, you just showed your honest views on things, and there's that old Maya Angelou quote, which is one of my favorites, which is when somebody shows you who they really are, don't make them show you a second time.
Yeah.
And when somebody does that with you in business, that is the only sign that you need to stop doing business with that person immediately.
Here's a good example. And I won't name drop anybody, but I know of a group that they'll get a house under contract, usually prior to seeing it, right? They'll lock it up first. They'll do their inspection period. They're very upfront about that. But then no matter what that comes back, whether they're making 5 or 50, they'll try to price drop after the inspection, even if they already have decided they're making 50K. And I'm like, I understand the logic, right? We didn't know what we were getting into before we walked it, so we have to come down 5 to 10K. I can understand the logic. But at the same time, if you're making 50K and this person is walking away with, call it, 5 to 10, do you really need to do that?
No, you don't. I mean, there's people go even further. We actually had one of our main title companies to work with here stop working with wholesalers because a frequent pattern they were seeing was the wholesaler would make 40 or 50 grand and the seller would have to bring money to closing.
Yeah, that's awful. I can honestly say I've never, ever had a closing like that.
No, God, no, never.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even consider it. We had one that was almost like that. And Dan and I, we literally did it was like a $16,000 price adjustment. And it's funny, their amount to closing was actually only $6 grand. But they were planning to move into this mobile home that they had bought for 10 grand. And they're like, oh, well, can we rent the house back while we do this? We don't know where the $10,000 is going to come from. So we just gave them that as well. So they could actually have proceeds to move on, and A, it was better for us because then they actually had somewhere to go.
Right.
Right. B, it allowed them to actually move on with their life instead of being in limbo again, which is the whole reason they called us in the first place because they were sort of stuck and not knowing what to do. And so to bring this back to the Pace Morby stuff, where that real big conflict of interest lives is you have him that is out there talking about, getting people who can't afford houses into houses, financial education stuff. Here's how you get stuff without any money. At the end of the day, the main conflict of interest is his only incentive is to get the deal done where he's going to get paid through his title company. He's going to get paid the wholesale fee he's going to charge you, or whatever other fees he charges you. Then as soon as it's done, he walks away. Now the seller, if it isn't set up right, is set in a situation where it can be defaulted on, right? The buyer potentially bought a property that actually sucks and they don't know any better because they just listened to their guru. But he made his money, and he might even know about it. For him at this point, it's so systematized. He could be doing 100 of these a month, 1,000 of these a month. And he would just be like, oh, cool. Money's coming in. I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other flip side of this is the sellers who, I shouldn't say just sellers. Or for example, right now we have a tenant who's older and I've always given them she's giving me the sob story. And so she's got behind before, she'd catch up, etc. Well, now I'm owed like $4,500 and I know she's been lying to me. I'm like, okay, now you're getting evicted and I'm going to come after the money that you owe me. So like there's two ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah, totally. What it'll ultimately lead to, I don't know. And same with like people that are raising money, the conflict of interest, they get their acquisition fee, their fund management fee, their sales fee, everything else. All of a sudden they're collecting.
There's a lot of fees in like the syndication space.
There's tons.
To a point where it's like, it could tally to be 5 to 6% of the AUM.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot. That is a lot of money for zero performance.
That's the concern, right? Is on the large syndication space, there's been a lot of pushback on those funds that were doing things on zero performance, or where they would collect money over like the length of time of the loan for like management or product management or property management, whatever it is, regardless of if things actually moved forward.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've seen pro formas like that where they say they'll collect X amount per month of the deal size, not even like the cash flows, but like the actual money that was raised for property management. Like every month, it'll be a couple of percent per year. I'm like, if you're doing a $10 million raise, that can be $200,000, $300,000 a year that they're collecting.
Yeah.
To do nothing.
And yes, like my understanding is the fund admin fees are supposed to go to overhead, but I mean, I guess the GP could do whatever they wanted. Yeah, supposed to, right? Exactly.
That's my gossip. I said, I think it's always so interesting when stuff kind of comes back around like that, especially because like it was one of those things I kind of forgot about, and then I have this person like hit me up like that, like be so intentional about it.
So you might have said it. That transaction was recent though?
I believe so. Yeah. They didn't give me dates or anything, but my guess is what happened is this agent was a part of this deal. It went sideways. They went down a spiral of like looking up things about Pace, came across our video, which does show up as one of the few anti-Pace Morby videos because he has such a cult following, and ended up leading her to reach out. But
okay, we'll see how that develops. Ongoing series on the Collecting Keys podcast.
Who knows? Could be talking. Yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll get hit up about this one again in 2 years.
Yeah. A lot of stuff feels like it's happening in just like not just the economy and not just in the stock market, but just like overall, and at the war, et cetera, et cetera. And the big part of this is like rates continue to kind of inch along, right? Mm-hmm. And all the durations too, 2, 10, 20, 30. And so I'm wondering, the 30-year just went above 5% for the first time since 2007. So literally 20 years since the great financial crisis.
Okay.
Has that affected your guys' lending at all? Because I know it has affected, like, if you're just a conventional borrower and like you're going to get your primary or a conventional loan.
So one of the big things that affects, we actually had a meeting with one of our DSCR investors yesterday. On the hard money side, it doesn't affect anything because that's purely just based off of the short-term yield.
Yep.
We had a meeting with one of our DSCR investors yesterday. And what really affects the DSCR rates more so is the inflation number that came out.
Okay. That was higher yesterday too.
Yeah, I know. And so that actually crunched rates pretty bad. Typically where the 10 years, I don't know how 10-year and inflation and stuff are linked, but the 10 years is kind of different because ultimately what happens with DSCR loans is they are securitized and they are sold essentially as security that's like a bond, right? But instead of being a government bond, it is a bond based off of the real estate assets that are in there. But the biggest thing that those bonds are compared to is inflation, right? In terms of figuring out the actual nominal rate of return. And so when inflation goes up, typically the DSCR rates will go up as well because
they want to maintain the spread.
They want to maintain the spread to be the same. Yeah.
So even with the CPI, core inflation, PPI, some of the inflation metrics, quarterly, you guys are probably like getting adjustments on the DSCR side.
Yeah, we are for sure. And one of the reasons it isn't as tied to the 10-year anymore is because the backing of that asset, the bond versus the securitized DSCRs, is it's now like a different thing. And the trend has been towards people not believing in the U.S. government as much because there's this huge default risk and all these other things. But they are still believing in like American small business owners and American real estate. And so there's a lot of appetite for DSCR, and it's really has like decoupled from any of the federal bond stuff that people can buy instead.
The catch-22 here is like, there is no greater trade, I think, right now, like, or at least like higher confidence trade to me is that there will continue to be debasement of the US dollar. And what do you do when you hold US dollars is you would like to own hard assets, real estate being one of them, high quality stocks, commodities, et cetera, infrastructure, et cetera. At the same time, the debt that's on some of that stuff, like 30-year things, are if you are the lender for 30 years, would not be a great trade in that matter, because you're locking in a payment for 30 years that 10, 20, 30 years from now is going to have less purchasing power then than it does today. And so, I mean, that's just the advantage of real estate in general, and locking in 30-year fixed debt.
Yeah, totally. Like the things get retraded as you go down the line. And so there's always so many different buyers. And as like the pay down gets more extensive, like that becomes a lower risk thing. And so there's all kinds of different ways that people trade it as it goes. But yeah, I mean, what do you think this means from like a larger like economic view? Because the things are so decoupled right now. Is you have that stuff getting high, we have consumer spending being low.
Well, Kevin Warsh is coming in, right, Mike? And like, I think his biggest struggle is like, okay, we're having these higher inflation prints, but when inflation tends to rise, that means you would raise interest rates to kind of combat the inflation. However, the Bessent, Trump, all them want lower interest rates. So will he really remain nonpartisan for that? I don't know. So, but they're in like this stagflationary environment, which kind of means like you have higher unemployment. So like the economy is getting weaker and you have inflation problems. It's like the worst of both worlds, right? So I don't really know the best path forward, other than what people do is financial repression, which means that we talked about this last week, they'll continue to print money, they'll continue to debase the currency, and then you have to try to do that in a minimal way that doesn't offset inflation too much.
Yeah. Why do you think they want lower interest rates? You think just for like votes, so it's like a better headline? Or you think there's actually like a reason behind it?
I think they know lower interest rates will help stimulate the economy, which will then help with their reelection.
Will it though?
I do think if you were to, let's say if you were going to go to a lot of investors and say that who have bought the past recently, that they can get a new home. I shouldn't say investors. Let's say you can get like primary residence people down to increase the housing supply, or even people who want to refinance who don't have the 2 to 3% rates.
Well, the thing is though, just because they lower interest rates doesn't mean that mortgage interest rates are going to lower.
Like if you were to put a graph over interest rates in like the 10-year, there is a pretty tight correlation. Like, yes, it might not be immediate.
There has been, but Fannie Freddie also stopped buying loans, in 24?
Something like around there.
So it's going to get further and further away. And just if they ask for interest rates, that doesn't mean that, all of a sudden they're going to start buying mortgages again.
Well, what else is good in lower interest rate environments? It's usually stocks, right? And so this is kind of like the wealth effect, right? If people feel richer, they're more likely to spend. We're a consumption-based economy, therefore be good for GDP, which is good for headlines.
Yeah. I don't know. It's tough. If you say it'll be good for business, different things, I just don't understand how it would be. Because also too, if you're trying to get money from investors or banks or different things, but always the stocks are just constantly on fire, why would they go and they would invest with you at that point? I mean, we already deal with this all the time, with, when we raise money for our stuff, it's like a fixed rate is cool. It's like, but I'm up 38% on fucking NVIDIA right now.
I mean, totally. And that's a valid thing, but that just comes down to the individual person you're trying to raise money from.
For sure.
What's their personal life situation? And okay, can I interest you in some diversification away from 100% of stock portfolio?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people feel like they can't lose. It is hard to do that. That's why I feel like there has to be a big crash or correction coming, is because we are in that phase. When you look at an overall investment standpoint, it feels very similar to 2021, early 22 real estate, when everyone feels like they're the smartest person in the room and they can't lose in the market. And that's when stuff gets weird, right? I
mean, dude, the action lately, obviously I wasn't trading anything during the 2000s, but some of the historical analogies I've seen just from people I follow on X are kind of crazy. Let's put some data around it. The Schiller PE is the price to earnings ratio, and it's a 10-year average. Right now it's at 42. The highest ever was 44, and that was during the 2000.com bubble.
Okay. So we're basically there.
Yeah. And then we talked about breadth one time before on the show, so out of the S&P 500, it hit an all-time high yesterday or 2 days ago, but 9% of the companies inside the S&P 500 made new all-time lows.
Yeah, interesting. So there's a huge spread between
huge spread, and it's very, very top heavy.
Yeah,
meaning that it is very concentrated in a few amount of stocks. Again, and that I put some data behind that too. Actually, that 9% number is an all-time record in the history of the stock market.
Yeah, but but is that a symptom of there just being more money that's circulating? right?
Well, that's a percentage-based metric, so you wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, man. And it's like we talked about on the show, like there is a huge discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots right now. The University of Michigan survey just came out like with the worst sentiment of all time, while the S&P 500 is hitting all-time highs.
Yeah. I mean, do we know what percentage of like people own most of the stocks? I'm sure that's something that we can find.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's like the top 10%.
Yeah. Own like the vast majority of them. It has to be. And that's different as well, because I think traditionally when there's been like a stock market correction, it's kind of dispersed across more people. And so what happens is it starts to correct and you have all these people that see their paper wealth disappearing. And so what they do is they jump in and they sell and they do all these things so it kind of like chases itself down. But if you have so many people that are like so rich that if they lose 30% of their portfolio, they're still worth $100 million. They don't give a fuck. Like they'll just hang out.
The wealthiest 10% of American households own approximately 87 to 93% of all United States stock market wealth.
That's crazy.
By contrast, the bottom 50% of earners hold roughly 1% of total U.S. equities. Yahoo Finance.
And so the rest of it is dispersed. Man, so that's nuts. So like what's the total, it's like market value of that? It's trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so and 92% of it is owned by 10% of the households.
I mean, they said 87 to 93, so just call it 90 for the
90,
middle.
Sure.
But yeah, that is actually, I didn't think it'd be that skewed.
So that's like the thing that's so different, right? Is like you have essentially these people that are just playing inside baseball with their own money.
The top 1% by comparison hold over 16 trillion in stocks.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, there will be at some point, who the fuck knows when, but like a mean reversion to this.
This is how you get to like freaking sci-fi movies where we no longer have a government and you just have like the different companies that basically rule everything. They'll have the Anthropic army going to war with the freaking
Sam Altman.
the open AI company or whatever. Like NVIDIA will have its own armed forces to protect its data centers. That's literally like where all this shit heads. I don't understand how it doesn't. But that's like not that far removed from if you go back to like imperialism times and you had like the East India Trading Company that was basically this massive force that would just like take over nations for trade, and they were a privately owned company.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we should have a discussion sometime, not now, but like Mike's maybe solutions to some of these. And whereas because
I don't have a solution because I think it's too far gone. You know what's so funny is there's like all these
control or delete.
Yeah, like there's so many people that have been against socialism for so long. Basically, we are now just going to the complete opposite end where it's anti-socialism, where they're worried about socialism because the wealth is going to be distributed across too many people. Now the wealth is going to be just so confined on like a few people that it doesn't really matter. Like that you can't fix it. I don't really know where you go from there when it gets to that point because they have all the resources and they have all the levers to do everything. The only way that it changes is if they mutually agree or like there's like something that gets overthrown within the cool kids club.
Well, no, I think you'll just see more of like the Mondami type get voted into larger and larger cities. I think that'll trend. That'll continue.
But it doesn't matter. Votes in political position don't matter if like they're not the ones that are actually pulling the strings.
I'm trying to think of a historical analogy. And so like when FDR came in, like during the Great Depression, and like the only way he was going to get reelected is if like they created all these social entitlement programs, which is when a lot of this stuff got formed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you're going to see more of a trend to that than not in the next decade.
So one of the reasons it's really changed now is because the world's gotten so much smaller because of the internet, right? Because of the ability to travel different things. And so what'll happen is like, let's say that a US president comes in and goes, I'm going to crash down on all the corporations that now control everything. Anthropic will go, you know who's not going to do that? China. They'll just leave.
Yeah, that's very valid.
They don't even have to leave their island that they live on in the fucking Caribbean. They can just run all their operations through China remotely. It doesn't matter because like they won't have the same legislation there because they don't care. And so when FDR came in, like the world was very small. At that point, if you wanted to get across the ocean, didn't matter how rich you were. It was an endeavor.
That's fast.
Right? If you were poor, it wasn't even an option. If you were rich, it was a 30-day thing to go on the, freaking Titanic 2. You hope it doesn't sink. Right. That was what it did. And that wasn't even that long ago. So like when my dad, he had owned a travel company for most of his life. He used to fly back and forth from England, where he was born, down to New Zealand, where he moved as a young man. In order to make that trip from England to New Zealand, which is about as far as you can possibly get, right? Like currently to do that, you take 2 jets, you go through like Doha or Dubai, and it's like a 12-hour flight, like a 14-hour flight. Back in like the 60s and 70s when he was doing that, dude, it was like an Indiana Jones map. You know, like where you're zoomed out and you're basically like jump into all the places. It'd be like an 18-leg trip to get anywhere.
Jesus.
You know, and that's—
You must have really liked New Zealand.
Yeah, totally. Well, like, that was also what you did back then, you know? Or like he has a story about when his first daughter was born in the UK, and him and his wife at the time and daughter were going to go back to New Zealand. They got on a boat in England for a month to get back down to New Zealand. Now people call that a cruise. They called that just like the travel portion, you know, that's like long for like a cruise. That's what they did, you know? And so like going back to FDR, like that didn't exist. And so these people that wanted to play business, they had to follow by the politicians' rules. Now they don't, because they can just change who their politician is.
I agree with everything that you're saying.
Yeah.
But there's got, I don't know, man. I refuse to believe that it's just like all hope is lost and something else will happen. It'll all continue to get worse from here. Right. Like,
I think that the reason I'm such a doomer with this kind of stuff is because it's funny. I made a joke earlier about how there are bad people in the world. Most people are good. I think that most of the people that get into those extreme positions, most of them are past the point of having good intentions externally. I think that they might internally for their own self-gain, for their company, for things like that. But we don't really see these companies doing these things for the betterment of all mankind. Because if they were, they wouldn't have their entire objective be around how can I make it so that people no longer work, and so that we just like automate everything, because that is the absolute epitome of repressing humans' ability to have value as a species.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I'm all for the anti-data center movements going around here too.
Yeah.
Like,
but that's why I'm a doomer, because those are the people that are driving everything, and they do not have the best interests of humans at heart. Because
what is your opinion on Elon Musk?
You know, I don't hate Elon.
He is a weirdo.
My opinion on Elon Musk is he is such an amazing case study that no matter how much money you have, if you're still a loser, no one wants to hang out with you.
I like his I don't give a fuck personality, whether that's his true personality or not. But
that's his coping mechanism, because he's literally the richest person that's ever existed, and he still doesn't have any friends. Like, honestly. That's my opinion on him. He's like the biggest freaking dork, and no one wants to say him. He didn't even get invited to Epstein Islands. Stephen Hawking did, and he didn't.
Yeah, that's why he has a grudge. He was jealous. He's
butthurt about it. Yeah, he's butthurt about it too. Assuming any of those emails are real, which are probably fake. I don't know.
Where are we on this one, man? Where are we going from here?
I don't know. Dan will be back next week. He'll have a whole different opinion.
Oh, yeah. This would have been a great discussion for Dan. He would have went off the railing about half an hour ago.
Oh, I know. I already know where Dan would be on it, where he just hates the government in period anyway. And his whole position is to take care of himself, which I fully respect, and just make sure that he can abstain from system as much as possible, which I think at this point is pretty much all you can do.
Yeah. I mean, if there is a takeaway, get your own family wealthy and then be in a position where if you want to help other people, you can.
Yeah, exactly. I also think there's a big lean towards like local community. I think that if people focus too big on a like national, or I'm not going to say like international, just like a national level on things, it's always going to be feel like a lost cause, but you can always make impacts in your local community if that is something that you want to do. And I think just focus on that. There we go. Positive spin to end.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So right on. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. If you have any more dirt on Pace Morby, I would love to hear it. You can go ahead and DM me on Instagram, Mike_invests, or Dylan at Dylan_does_deals. And if you have other deals that went sideways with them, or more little tidbits on this impending SEC thing that I've been hearing about for a while, I'm dying to know. I can't do anything about it. I'm just so nosy.
Don't be afraid to I think people feel dumb if they lose money.
Of course.
And so they don't reach out for that reason, or like they don't advertise for that reason. Like, don't let that be the hindrance of speaking truth to it. So
if you have like valid wrongdoings with somebody, you should absolutely speak about that. You don't need to protect people that are doing bad stuff, because guess what? They're going to go and do bad things to other people as well.
Exactly.
Cool. Right on. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you guys next time.
See ya.
This episode is sponsored by Sir Lancelot LLC, also known as SLA Capital, which, if you didn't know, is Dan and I's private lending company. So yes, we are sponsoring our own show, but what you going to do about it? It is our private lending company that offers hard money and DSCR loans to real estate investors of all types. So you can be a new investor, an experienced investor. You can be buying flips, you can be buying rentals, whatever. We can do everything. And not only that, but the rates that we offer are just as competitive, if not cheaper, than pretty much every other company out there. So whatever big company you've been working with, bring us their term sheets and I guarantee you that we can probably beat it. We have the same connections they do. We just don't have all the overhead and middlemen. So if you want to come and check us out, go to slacapital.com/keys and I will know that you came from the show. And by seeing that you came from here, when you get to closing, you will save $500 on your first loan with us. So slacapital.com/keys, we would love to fund your next deal. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you want more from us, you can shoot us a follow on Instagram. I am at Mike_invest. Dan is at InvestorMan Dan. And Dylan is at Dylan_does_deals. Shoot us a follow and send us a DM to let us know what you think of the show.